So I had some major concerns about the county joining the Orange County Power Authority. I thought it was premature. It was a new entity, and that's why I had voted no when it came before us. But what's transpired recently since the county joined, I think I have concerns about the ongoing participation for the county in the Orange County Power Authority. I've read both audit reports, and while I had hoped for the sake of the county that, and certainly for our tax-paying residents, that my concerns would be unwarranted. Unfortunately, what happened was the exact opposite. It sort of validated and heightened with the findings in both of the audit reports. There were several key findings in the reports that I found very disturbing, and in my opinion, strongly support the argument that it's time that we consider pulling out of the Orange County Power Authority. There's a lack of openness and transparency in sharing the information with the public. There were some highly questionable contracting policies and procedures, a lack of industry experience among the staff, failure to adhere to organizational policies and procedures. They don't even follow the organizational policies and procedures that they had put in place. And that was highlighted in the audit reports.
And do you disagree with any of the audit findings? Of
Yes.
either of the two findings?
Yes.
Okay, which findings do you disagree with?
I didn't bring a comprehensive list of each of the findings.
I can provide you with the findings if you want to go through it.
You want to? It could be a very extensive conversation, but if you...
Well, we're here today to make a decision as to whether to withdraw from the Power Authority or not. And your answers to my questions are going to be indicative of my vote. And I think that we can all read the room here. And so what findings do you disagree with that you don't think you can implement? I think that's those are important facts for me to know.
Right. There were findings related to process of purchase orders for goods and services versus contracted work, and we have a very well documented process for both of those, and the paperwork takes different routes. And the auditor's suggestion was that services like hours of people should take the same route as product and goods and services. So if we're having your advisor do some work in hours, you should do it the same way you would buy staplers. And we have a very well documented process, but they take different routes. If there is a practical way to combine those and still do it, then we will.
The chairman mentioned that there were no board bylaws, or there were no organizational bylaws. Is that correct?
There's a JPA agreement governing the authority. There's not a separate document titled bylaws, and that would certainly be a discussion that our board directors would have at their level.
So similar to the chairman, I've been practicing law for 26 years. I often advise nonprofits. I probably haven't done hundreds, but I've certainly drafted tens of 20s of corporate nonprofit articles of incorporation, which is comparable to a JPA, and the complementary bylaws, which I agree with the chairman. Normally you have a bylaws, like on day one, you would have bylaws. Even the booster organizations at the local high school, when you do your articles of incorporation for a nonprofit status, you adopt the bylaws at the same time. So what's the reason why there are no bylaws?
It's not a staff decision. Our board has operated well with a JPA agreement, which is very similar to bylaws, titled differently. It's very detailed in process and procedure and authorities, but certainly one of the recommendations, and we'll bring that to our board if they want to adopt different governance.
Clarify the bylaws issue too, if you
Could
like
you clarify that? Go ahead.
Yes, so I very much respect corporate law and the laws that you practice, and bylaws are required. Under joint powers authorities, they are not required. And in fact, one of the entities that OCPA has been compared to in the local power report, it doesn't have bylaws, and there might be 2 of them in there. They've chosen to actually implement a series of policies. So when this issue was addressed and responded to by the Board of Directors to the Orange County Grand Jury, we specified that bylaws are not required. The powers of the board and the duties of the chair and the vice chair, and when the board meets, are actually in the joint powers agreement. Some of the more modern JPAs that we write as a firm actually put more of those bylaw type things in the agreement itself. And then things like confidentiality policies and other procedural aspects are left in individual policies, which is how OCPA has proceeded, and that's the formal response that was given and approved by the board to the Orange County Grand Jury when it made that finding as well.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
In my legal career, I have created more than 100 corporations. And the day it was created, any of these corporations, their very first meeting, we always did bylaws. Those bylaws define the roles of the officers and define the roles of the board. So how can you even go forward on something that's so basic and not there? Very important to me were the requests for power documents. So I read through the code regarding the allowing the power authority to withhold that information. It's optional. It's not mandatory that you do that. You can hold it back for 3 years with good reason, but you had a request from one of your partners. It's even been found by some of the interviews that even the board members don't get that information. Some do, some don't, apparently. So the very thing I was looking for has been denied.
It's very important that I get answers to my questions because, frankly, I'm extremely disappointed in how this is all playing out. Even your answers to Vice Chair Wagner today and to Supervisor Doe give me pause because I agree with Chairman Chafee that there's no reason why you could not have entered into your eyes only agreement of confidentiality as to the contracts so that our team could analyze the issues so that they could advise us in anticipation of today's meeting. And the fact that you weren't willing to do that is a concern because we just keep having these same conversations about what we ask, and then there's like a little bit of information provided, but not all of it. And so the transparency component is very important, and it isn't just a talking point. It's a method of operation.
I would just again emphasize you've got a startup organization here with enormous problems, promises, but facing problems that one would expect in some ways of startup organizations, and maybe some that weren't expected, and that have been identified by these audits and the future audits that are coming. The only risk is actually in us pulling out. And that's where we won't know because we haven't been able to see the details of those contracts, rightly or wrongly. But at this point, we're operating in the dark. We don't know what the risk is to our constituents. This is our only opportunity to provide that clean energy. Because if we pull the plug and this agency craters, then our constituents are at risk. Then they're denied choice. And more importantly, no one is going to want to go near the smoking crater for ages. And the goal of an opportunity for more clean energy, for more people, will evaporate for the undecided, but I am worried long time to come.
Let's focus on management, and we have among us on the Board of Supervisors a member of the Board of Directors for the Power Authority. And we have heard assurance both from Supervisor Wagner and the CEO for OCPA that significant changes are being made.
And one more question, Mr. Probalski. I know we kind of talked about the findings, but has the Power Authority made any changes to your financial procedures since reviewing the audits that were published?
We've had the audits for about a week, so we haven't made any changes in the last week, no.
Well, the first audit came out a couple weeks ago.
The first audit was very retrospective. Talked about a lot of things from a year ago, things that we're not doing now, but to the extent that we re-engaged in that, like we are for the county when we'll do our noticing, we will definitely look at changes and working directly with the Board of Supervisors and communication staff from the county.
Okay, thank you.
And had one more concern of my own. The reports indicate there are some policies and procedures in place, but they're not always followed. So I don't know how we get in place corrective action when you, on paper, may do something, but then not necessarily follow.
But at the end of the day, and I was so hoping that I didn't have to make this vote today, but at the end of the day, it just boils down to trust and transparency for me. That's all it boils down to. And I don't trust the information. I don't trust that we will be able to fix what I think are systematic operational problems. And I'm concerned because we've been talking about this since I asked for the audit in August of last year. We actually have been talking about it since I was the mayor of Costa Mesa, and I raised many of these issues with both Mr. Barron and the city of Irvine.
I always thought that the Power Authority, Orange County Power Authority, is new, and I thought it was premature for the county to jump right in. And sure enough, there were just numerous problems that had occurred. We've got multiple audits, and questions have been asked, and I think the answers were, frankly, nebulous. They weren't answers. They weren't answers, period.
All right. If there is no further discussion, I'm going to ask the clerk to call a roll vote.
Supervisor Bartlett?
Yes.
Chairman Chafee?
Aye.
Vice Chairman Wagner? No. Supervisor Doe? No. And Supervisor Foley?
Aye.
3-2, Mr. Chairman.
3-2, the motion carries. All right, thank you all for coming in, and would hope for a better conclusion.